if you need closed captioning or translation, you are able to do that in Google. All you have to do is click on the three dots at the bottom, go to caption, and select your preferred language. So if you need Spanish or any language, then that is how you can access those translated captions. All right, and I am going to quickly introduce you to our team. I am Amanda Major, the program specialist at Coastal GLRS. And also on the call, we have Shelly Woodward. She's facilitating, and she is the program specialist with Southeast GLRS. And then today we have a special guest, Florence Bry. She is with the Georgia Department of Education, and she is one of the program specialists there. So she's going to be contributing to the discussion, and she's really excited to hear from you guys. So for our agenda, we're going to do a really quick check-in, and then we have put together just a mini presentation on teaching independent living skills. I'm going to provide you guys with some resources. And remember, this is informal. So throughout, if you have specific questions or you want me to slow down, elaborate, if there's just something maybe that comes to mind, please feel free to ask. All right. Oops. So if you could please just let us know how you're feeling today on a scale from 1 being feeling stressed, low energy, this just is not my day, to 5 somewhere in between, or 10 feeling excited, energized, and alert. And you can do it in the chat box or you can unmute, but I'll say I am probably about a 7 or 8 today. I proctored standardized testing this morning, which isn't my favorite thing, but it's different. And, you know, it's something different. And I'm still waiting to hear back from an electrician about an issue at my house. So those are the reasons that I'm not a 10. But it is Friday, and I'm really excited to be here today. So I'm more than a 5. Let's see the chat box. We've got 6, 8, 10, 8. Six. I consider it a pretty positive thing if most everyone is higher than a 5. So that's good. And hopefully you'll be feeling a little more energized and excited after the training. That is my hope. So as I said, we're going to try something a little bit different today in that I'm going to include the Jamboard. And I'm doing this because we want to hear from you. We want to know what you already know about teaching self-help or independent living skills. But we also want to know what you wonder or what kind of help you would like specifically. And then at the end, to sum it up, we're going to come back to it and just kind of make sure that we've addressed some of those things with what you've learned. So I'm going to put a link in the chat box first so that you can click on the link. And then I'm going to explain it to you guys by sharing this screen instead. The first box is the one that we're going to start with, and it just says what I know about teaching independent living skills to children with autism. And that can be anything you think of that you feel like you'd like us to know here. And you're just going to click on the Post-it note and type in your response. And if you aren't sure what to put there, that's okay. We have a column on the right here. And it says what I wonder about teaching independent living skills. And that's where you can let us know questions you have, topics you'd like us to make sure to kind of include, maybe some resources we can provide you after. And I'm just going to give everybody just a couple minutes to work on this. And if for some reason there aren't enough boxes, I can add more. But I think we'll be all right. All right, so we've got some things in here. We have under what I know about teaching independent living skills, we have that it is critical, 100%. Keeping an open mind, working situations that cater to my child's strengths. We're definitely going to talk about that. Finding ways to make it work and to never stop trying. Absolutely. One thing that we know is that, you know, our children can continue to grow and work on things. And I'm going to share a little bit of just background knowledge and some ways that we can utilize the strengths of people on the spectrum when we're teaching. And then what I wonder, we have someone put strategies. That's why we are here. We are going to give you some and give you some resources. Looks like a couple more people are putting things in, so I'll give you just another minute or so. Some books on the subject. I have some to recommend. I'm going to make a note to remember.
I honestly read a lot about this stuff. I've probably read about 10 or 15 books on this.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I'm always looking and trying to create new angles.
Good. Well, hopefully some of the resources that we have will be good. But since you are well read on the subject, also, if you have ideas or you have just comments, I want to encourage you to share your thoughts and experiences on some of the things we talk about. All right, we are going to come back to this KWL a little later. So if you think of things along the way, feel free to just keep it up and type it in. And I'm going to move on because it seems like it's now kind of slowing down. All right. So independent living skills, also sometimes called self-help skills, and you may hear me use those terms interchangeably. When we talk about that, we're talking about just all the skills that people use every day to maintain our appearance, our health and hygiene, to maintain our household, to keep our body safe, um, to navigate the world around us outside of work and school. So these are all some of the most important skills that a person acquires. These skills give us autonomy. They allow us to live more independently or with less support. And many people with autism need some extra time and extra support to learn these important skills. In some families, adults have to complete these tasks for their child and even for their adult children. So today we seek to provide you some strategies for teaching your children to perform these skills themselves or with less support, so that we can help them function more independently and hopefully reduce some of the stress on you, their caregivers. We're going to talk about some strategies today, and I just want to let you guys know that they are based in research. A lot of them are drawn from scientific studies, but the way that we want to talk about them today is how to make them feasible within the home setting for you all. I know everybody is busy. It seems like there's not enough time each week to accomplish everything we need to do. And many of you, your hands are really full with work, with family, and especially with having a child with a disability. So I am going into this understanding that. But I just want to say, if something that we're talking about doesn't feel manageable, then let us help you maybe come up with a plan. And I just really want to emphasize the importance of taking the time to work on these skills, because while it's not easy, especially in the beginning, as your child does acquire the new skills and becomes more independent, it will get easier for you.
And I'm going to jump in for just a second, Amanda. While it's never too late to teach these skills or attempt to teach these skills, the earlier you start that process, it makes it much, much easier in the long run, because it is typically a little bit easier to teach a younger child some of these things, or at least expose them to it, versus waiting until they're in adolescence. So just keep the end game in mind as you're working through and thinking about some of these things.
Thanks, Flo. I completely agree, and I just know that these are the skills that are going to allow our students to better fully participate in school and the environment around them, and recreational activities, community activities, and eventually jobs. So as many of these things as we can accomplish, the better. So getting started earlier is absolutely going to be critical. And then also, I want to talk to you guys just for a second about how this does connect to school, because I mentioned that it allows them to more fully participate in school. But I do want you to know that you're not completely alone in working on the self-help and independent living skills. If there are skills that you're especially struggling with at home, the IEP meeting is a good time to bring those up, because you've got a team of educators who know a lot, who can kind of have that, they all know your child and they know the things your child likes. So they may be a good person to have on your team to talk about maybe some specifics of how you might work on this. And then they can help by following up with some of the same things at school, because the most successful programming is consistent among adults and settings. So whatever you're doing at home that's working, share that information with the school so they can work on it the same way you do. And then the same thing, if at school your child is doing something and you're not able to get them to do it at home, that's very normal, especially for students on the spectrum. Talk to the staff there so that you can figure out where those inconsistencies are, and maybe they've got a different approach. So here are some of the areas that we consider when we're talking about independent living skills. Under personal care, that's going to be skills like bathing, grooming, brushing their teeth, toileting, brushing their hair. Under food skills, it can be anything from feeding or eating to packing their lunch, preparing a snack, using utensils, or even being able to pick out the right foods on a grocery list or order food from a menu, depending on the age and the communication level of the student. And then for clothing maintenance, that category, I'm going to be talking about getting dressed, being able to put on our socks and shoes, tie our shoes, but also things like folding clothes and hanging up clothes, helping with the laundry, again, depending on the age of our child and where they are. Health and safety encompasses many things within the household. That might be avoiding things that are dangerous, like the hot stove or an iron or broken glass. But under health and safety, that might also be taking your medicine. It might be, not eloping out of the house when no one's watching. So lots of kind of skills might be encompassed there. And then this bottom row, these are skills that perhaps as the child gets a little older, that they may begin to work on. Some of them maybe when they're younger. But household maintenance may be cleaning up after themselves, chores at home, fixing things. Money management might be counting money, making change, understanding the concept of money and that things are expensive versus things that are affordable. Community awareness and transportation might be calling 911 if there is an emergency, or knowing where to go if I need to mail a letter or if I need to pick up eggs. Which place do I go and how am I going to get there? So that transportation piece. And then finally is self-advocacy. And this is very important. It's being able to communicate your wants and needs, being able to let someone know if you need help, and just letting people, know where they stand. So being able to advocate for themselves. So all of these things are really critical skills for any adult. And so we're going to talk about just some different ways that the strategies can really apply to skills within any of these categories. So every individual with autism is affected differently. We talked about that a little bit in some previous meetings. However, most have at least some of these characteristics in common, because these are characteristics that come from the definition of autism. So unlike typically developing children, children with autism are less likely to learn simply by observing or being shown something and told what's expected from them. So while if you have more than one child, your child that doesn't have autism may have just picked up on things by watching you do it or watching their brothers and sisters do it. But your child with autism may not be doing that. Understand that that's due to some deficits related to their autism. And that doesn't mean that they cannot learn. So due to deficits in social interaction, communication, or having that limited range of interests, a child on the spectrum may not be quite as motivated to please the adults around them. A lot of the time when kids are learning skills, they're like, look at me, I can do this. But if your child doesn't have that communication ability, or they have some social differences, then that motivation may not be there, or they just may not be able to communicate that desire that they want to please you in that way. For some children on the spectrum, imitation is also impaired. So they may be watching and observing the things that their parents and siblings are doing, but they don't necessarily then know how to make their mouth or their body do the same thing. And then those same language or communication delays may impede their ability to understand the verbal directions. And then additionally, many people with autism have sensory issues, self-stimulatory behaviors, or rigid thinking. Children with autism, due to those sensory issues or due to their, rigid thinking, which means just having difficulty maybe shifting gears between thoughts, or they like to do things the same way every time. They may have an aversion to certain sounds, certain smells, certain tastes, textures, or other environmental stimuli, which might be like a crowd. They may engage in some impeding behaviors. And they might just have a really particular way about doing things. So I'm going to pause for a second and just ask you guys, do these characteristics sound familiar to you? And what might some of this look like for you?
We carry a bag for my 4.5-year-old, and so like I said, when you talk about like crowds and all that, and we know that there's going to be a potential risk for like a meltdown, I'll show you. I carry a backpack with a weighted vest and a few sensory toys, such as ones that cater to like his, I believe he has an auditory under responsivity. So, I mean, he's always inspecting stuff. So, like, when times do get a little bit challenging, he's, well, I mean, he's able to request it now, but that's been our goal.
Absolutely. So you are preparing in advance, understanding your child, and that some of these things might get in the way of his ability to navigate those settings. And then I also have in the chat box that Christina says absolutely. It does feel familiar to her.
I did want to say one way that I had autism explained to me. It's been many years ago. If we wanted to step into the shoes of our children for just a minute, somebody once explained it like if you were dropped off in a foreign country where you did not know the language, the culture, the cultural norms, like when it's okay to sit or stand or shake or bow, whatever it might be, whatever the societal norms were, the social, things that were socially appropriate. That's very much like what it would be to be in the body of someone who is on the spectrum. So when you really stop and think about that for a minute, imagine that you're in a place where nobody understands you. You don't understand what they're really, how they're communicating with each other, whether it's verbally or whether it's through their gestures or whatever else it might be. That's just a peek in the window of what it's like. So think about what your reaction might be, even as an adult, if you were put in that situation. And I think it gives us just a peek into sometimes why our kiddos react the way they do or feel the way they do. So it's an interesting way of thinking about it. And it's one that's always kind of stuck with me. Once I heard that one, it was like, okay, that's one I need to keep in my back pocket because it helps keep me grounded with what it might be like.
I think of it kind of like describing it as a computer system. Either we're Windows or Apple people. My son runs on Linux.
That's perfect. Absolutely. And
I may borrow that one from you, sir.
We have this. Oh, that's a good one in the chat box too. And that really brings me, I think that's a good way to come into this next slide. I see a hand up. Christina?
Hey, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I've learned with my own son, I realize he doesn't know the expected behaviors that I want him to, perform or whatever. So what I've done recently is just to give him like a rundown of what's ahead. Like, hey, we're gonna go here first, and then we'll go do that later, instead of just like, hey, go here, go there, wherever. And that way he knows the rundown of what to expect and what I'm looking for.
For sure. That is a very, very good strategy. And it's something that's really common that kind of goes back to those social deficits or not understanding those social norms. Some of the things that other people just naturally pick up have to be taught more explicitly or explained more explicitly to our students. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to get there. They learn differently. They don't necessarily have to learn less, and they're not worth less because they need that different way of learning.
And
so,
Christina, I put in the in the chat, those are actually called social stories. That is a strategy that you might not have realized that you were doing, but you're actually doing when you talk a child through what's going to happen before it happens and you prepare them. And sometimes we do it with pictures. Sometimes we do it with words and pictures. Actually had a young lady that was transitioning from middle school to high school, and mom and child were very anxious about the transition. So we did a couple of things. One was we created a social story, and I went around that campus and took pictures of the cafeteria, the bus ramp, the ladies' room, the places that we knew that she would visit on a regular basis, and put that together for her and gave it to her. She and mom went over it multiple times, and then we planned for them to come to the school before school opened, and there were lots of people and crowds. And she actually got to take her social story and kind of walk through the building to see where those things were in real life. So she was able to start school with a much lower anxiety level than we would have ever thought. And I'm happy to say that young lady has graduated and actually is working now. So
That's awesome.
good to know, right?
My husband actually used a kind of something similar, a video for the dentist that other parents might want to utilize, because I know the dentist is kind of frightening for some of our kids. But he did a video on YouTube on what was going to be like rundown of what was to be expected of him.
Video modeling is great, and that is one of the strategies we're going to talk about. So I'm going to give you guys some resources and talk about it. But that is one of my favorite things to do, because first of all, so much of it is already made on YouTube and we're able to find it. But also, since everybody has smartphones now, it's something that we can make. I had a child that was having a hard time transitioning. He had been in the same classroom for kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. And he was starting as a third grader, and his classroom was on a different wing of the building. And we were having a really hard time getting him there. He did not want to make that turn out of the building. And so I made a video of walking from the bus to his new class. I talked to his mom in advance and found out he really, really liked the watermelon Sour Patch Kids. I put some on his desk in his new classroom. So I filmed us walking down, showed him that those would be there when he got there. I sent it to mom. They watched it a few times and he came to class. We didn't have to start every day with a little bit of like trauma before we got to the room because of that tool. So it's a really good tool. And like I said, we're going to talk about it. I'm glad that some of you are already using it. Because many
Whenever
go ahead.
whenever we go to new places like gatherings and all that, we don't really go to those, but we ask if we could show up early so that way he can scout it out and find like a quiet corner if that's what he needs, and not as many people at first, so that way we call it softening the blow, so that way it's just not so detrimental to walk into a house full of strangers, essentially.
I think that's an excellent strategy. And it helps. He will be comfortable before the crowd comes. And so they're kind of coming into his territory versus him having to come into theirs. And I think soften the blow is a great way to describe that. That's great. Because so many self-help skills consist largely of fixed sequential actions. This can actually be a strength for a lot of children with autism. Self-help skills don't require as much abstract thinking, and they don't usually require as much social interaction, which are sometimes weaker areas. So children with autism sometimes will show pretty rapid learning of these skills once they understand that expectation. Like Christina said, she thinks a lot of the time the breakdown in itself is him understanding what's expected. It's not necessarily that they can't perform that expectation once they know it. Many of our children just have a different way of learning, and that means they need a different way of teaching. So we're going to talk about a couple things. And the first is that determining what to teach and when to teach it. We're going to talk about using reinforcement or rewarding our children for learning. We're going to talk about breaking big skills into smaller steps and teaching them in more manageable chunks. We're going to talk about incorporating effective teaching strategies and tools, which I'm going to give you some. And then we're going to talk about prompting. So when we're starting to focus on teaching children more independence, it's usually going to be best by beginning to tackle a single skill or something small and manageable. And then as we gain momentum, incorporating more skills into the practice. When we're thinking about where we should begin, we have to think about a few things. And the first is about developmental appropriateness of the task. And by developmental appropriateness, we're not necessarily thinking the same thing as age appropriateness, although they are related. When we talk about developmental appropriateness, we're thinking about those developmental milestones that guide, what age most people learn things, but we're really thinking about where your child is currently and what prerequisite skills they might need to get to that next step. So you may need to start with a skill that is required for you to teach the skill that you really want to teach. And we'll go through a few examples so you understand. But these resources here, which you're going to get the slides and they're linked, actually are some of the developmental milestones. And they're tools that I'm going to say are a really good tool to know the order that we should work on some skills, but not necessarily the age that we're going to work on those skills, because every child is unique, autism or not. And in children with autism, the patterns of growth and development tend to be all over the place. They're going to have some skills that are significantly below their peers, but then they're going to have some skills that are much further developed than other children. For example, when I was in my classroom, I had a student whose verbal skills were very limited. He didn't necessarily ask me when he needed to go to the restroom. He didn't ask me to help him open things or things like that. However, he was 6 years old and knew how to look at the box on the popcorn or the box on the microwave meals and look how many minutes. And he could microwave it himself by matching the 4 minutes on the box to the 4 on the microwave, which was a skill way beyond his age level if you look at those milestones. So we're really just going to think about these milestones as, where do we begin? Where are we now? Where do we want to be? And what skills might our child need? And so I'm going to give you the CDC milestones in English and in Spanish, but I've also provided here a self-help checklist, which I'm going to show you. It goes through different skills like feeding, dressing, toileting, hygiene skills. And what I would say is, if you're looking at a particular skill and your child isn't able to do it and you've been struggling, you've been working on it and you're not getting anywhere, then you need to look at the skills above it and say, does he have those skills that he needs in order to get to this next step?
I'm going to jump into, Amanda, and just say, it's very easy to get hung up. Oh, we have to do this, then we have to do this, then we have to do this. And there's the other thing of this that I've learned over more years than I'll care to share, is that there's always an alternative. We at one point I had a young man in my class that he was 19 or 20, and when I went into his meeting, there was this concern about that he couldn't tie his shoes. And now you're 20, and shoe tying is something that we think of for a much, much younger person. And I really came to the realization, and we had the conversation that day, is why is that really important? He can still wear shoes. You can wear loafers. There are other options of shoes to wear. That's not a hill you have to die on, because he's able to do all the other dressing things for himself. He's able to do all these other things. And the reality is, we've been trying to teach him to tie his shoes with every possible method known to man for the last 10 years. And okay, that's just not a skill he's going to pick up. But my goodness, he could do a multitude of other things. So we just realized, let's have loafers. Let's wear loafers or slip on tennis shoes. Doesn't have to look exactly the same. And those are very acceptable shoes that everyone else wears.
That's what I was going to say. What's in fashion right now are Crocs and slip-on Vans, and you don't have to tie those.
And I say that because it looks like most of you have younger children. And I know with our younger ones, we get really, they've got to learn to tie their shoes. They really don't. I mean, it's nice to know, but there are things that you can worry about a little bit more than that. But I know as a mom too, you get like, okay, we've got to get this done. We've got to check this one off the list. So sometimes when you're feeling that frustration, take a step back and think about, all right, is there another way I can do this? Or at the end of the day, really, how important is this right now in our lives? So just a little word of wisdom on that one.
I think that's a great word of wisdom, and it really relates next to the middle and the third column, because when we are determining what to teach and when, we really have to think about two things. It needs to be realistic about the current situation. So we need to look at the child's readiness to learn that skill, and also our readiness as adults to teach that skill. So if the skill is something the child has no experience with whatsoever, or a skill that the child is going to have an aversion to based on the experiences you've already had, right now might not be the moment to teach it. If you know you have company coming next weekend, that's probably not the weekend to start working on toilet training. We want you to know it's okay to have some realistic kind of plans and expectations around what needs to happen. And that column of considering is exactly what Flo was talking about. We need to think about what's the most important things to work on right now, the most functional things, and what is a child interested in learning it. If you see that your child is trying and they want to do something, that motivation in itself is going to make that an easier skill to work on right now. So I have a link here where it says, assess your child's learning readiness skills. And these are some questions that you might think about if you feel like you're really trying and you're spinning and you're not getting anywhere. These are some learning readiness skills that we need to make sure our child has. So if there are things on this list that your child doesn't have yet, this might be the best place to start. You're going to get a lot more bang for your buck if your child has these skills, because that means they're more ready to learn. And some of those are consistently looking when you call their name or tap on their shoulder. Paying attention when you give directions by stopping what they're doing and orienting their body and looking at you. This is a problem for all kids. This is a big problem for teenagers. But for students on the spectrum, if their focus is they're really honed in on something that they're interested in, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get them to switch gears. And some of the strategies we're going to talk about can help teach that specific skill. Are they able to follow simple one-step directions like sit down, wait, stand up? Do they look at objects and materials when asked to do so? Like, hey, look out the window. Did they do that? Are they able to sit or remain for a few minutes engaged in a particular activity? Do they have basic communication skills? That may be verbal, but if it's not verbal, can they use gestures, sign language? Do they communicate with pictures? Flo and I talked about this next one at length, and that's, are they able to identify or point to body parts? That's really important for a lot of skills. It's important for communicating if they don't feel good. It's important for following directions, like if you're trying to teach them, putting on their jacket, you're going to use words like arm, put your arm in. They need to be able to understand that language. It's important for them, for their self-advocacy skills and their ability to let you know if something's wrong. So that's a really important skill that you need in order to work on a lot of these self-help skills. Do they respond to physical guidance without resistance? And that's a lot of self-help skills are going to need some physical prompting to help your child work through it. And if they get really upset, if you're trying to guide them, then that might be a place to start. And then are they able to imitate simple motor actions? Because once they learn those basic imitation skills, then they're going to be able to imitate actions that you're taking when you're modeling the skills that you want them to do.
There's a method of physical guidance called graduated guidance that you may or may not have heard of. And it's got a long technical definition, but in real English, it simply means I'm only going to give you as much physical support as it takes for you to do the task. So if I'm prompting you to put your arm in your jacket and you start, once I've given you the initial physical prompt and you start putting your arm in, I back off, but I'm still there so that if you need help to complete the whole task, I can come in and physically prompt you a little bit more. But it's a great way. Sometimes with physical prompting, we feel like we're committed to, from beginning to end of tasks, that we have to keep hands on and keep moving them in the direction to complete. And that's not completely necessary. It might be the first time you try something with them, but after that, you may not need that. So it's good to know too that that's a recommended, scientifically vetted, strategy called graduated guidance. So just as much as they need, when you see them starting to move in the direction of what you need, you back off, but you stay in vicinity in case you need to go back in again. So just another one of those little things.
The next thing we're going to talk about is honestly the most important. Reinforcement is really anything that encourages or motivates a behavior. Reinforcing a behavior increases the likelihood that your child will perform that skill again. So when you hear us say the word reinforcement, we're really talking about rewards, or really it might be a thing, it might be a behavior that we engage in, but it is, what is that thing that's going to get my child to do that thing again? Or what's going to motivate them to want to help, like, let me help them do that thing again. It's a really key component to teaching any skill, self-help skills included. In addition to being motivating, rewarding a child at a specific time lets them understand what it was that they did correctly. Instead of just saying, oh, good job, nice job, high five, without letting them know which part of it they want. That's again one of those things. It's one of those social cues that they may or may not have picked up on. Some people are reluctant to provide children with tangible or edible rewards in fear of their child becoming too dependent on that. But I just want to remind everybody that everyone works for reinforcement. This isn't specific to children on the spectrum. Adults work for pay. Some children will work for compliments or good grades, but if your child isn't there yet, that's okay. A lot of people's children aren't there yet, and we have to meet them where they are. Rewards can be small, they can be faded over time, and we should be pairing them with social rewards like that praise, so that they're understanding that they're getting that reward because of what they did. And one strategy we can use for fading those rewards, so we don't feel like we're constantly giving these children the rewards, is through a token system. And that's what this picture is with the Legos here. And an example of how that might be used is that where it says, I am working for, perhaps your child really, really wants to go see the new Sonic movie. Then you can give them a task and they have to earn a Lego each day to go see the Sonic movie. Maybe they get the Legos for cleaning up their toys without fussing, or they get the Lego for getting on the bus without needing that physical assistance. But for another child, the token system might be something like, I'm working for time to play with my Legos. And those skills are going to be something that happens a lot more immediate and a lot more frequent so that he can have those Legos 10 minutes from now. And that may be where he gets the picture of the Lego, because when you called his name, he stopped what he was doing and turned and looked at you. And that way you are recognizing that's the behavior I want you to do again. And you're rewarding them for it. So all children aren't ready for a token system right away. You may need to start with those edible rewards or those toys, but when the child understands the system and you're ready to fade it, if you feel like you're rewarding them too frequently, the token system is just one strategy to use, and it's portable. So if your child wants something that you can't take with you, you can take the token system with you and show them, when we get home, look, you're going to be able to play your game. If this is something that you as a parent are interested in having, there are lots available online, and I have included some links, but it is something that we can help you make at GLRS, and I would be able to get it to you. So you can let us know on that Jamboard, or just let us know after the session, and that's something that I can assist with. Is there anyone in the group that already uses a token system or some kind of reward system, even if you're not using the visual, with your child in order to get them to engage in the behaviors that you would like?
We do secret handshake, and his reward is the tactile input that he wants. Like he calls it pressure, but like, for example, we just went grocery shopping and I had him pick out his own groceries, and every time he got all 10 boxes of his macaroni and cheese in a thing, he got a double high five. And like here, I'll show you. Like you take your hand and you just push it against his back and chest and squeeze that way. And that's one thing I've been doing for the past year or so. And then another reward is right now he gets to have a movie and a weighted blanket.
That's great. And he understands that he's able to work towards those things.
Oh, yes, of course. We don't really do that edit, like him getting snacks, because he's not really a foodie. It's the only child I've ever met that won't eat candy, but whatever. Dennis may not like that, but to us, it's kind of more structured to where, like, sorry, brain fart again. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. That's great. we have to meet our children where they are. If they're not foodies, then food is not going to be reinforcing. Whatever encourages our child to do what we want is going to be what's reinforcing for them. And I think we talked about this in our last meeting. Those things look kind of different for a lot of kids on the spectrum. The things that motivate them aren't necessarily the same things that are going to motivate other children their age. Sometimes they are, but they might need those things more frequently, or they may need a different version of those things. But those are the things that make our children individual. And
I mean, his Friday, Saturday reward is we usually go on an 8-mile hike each day. And I mean, it's by request. I mean, he begs me on Sunday to go hiking. I want to go hiking, and we pick a state park and walk the entire thing. But I mean, like, he'll come to me on Monday and I'll just say, hey, if the teacher says you're good to go for the week, you get a pizza on Friday, and then Friday, Saturday, you get a trip to the state park about 50 miles from here.
That's fabulous. And that would not be reinforcing to me. While I would do it, that's not what I'm going to work for, because to me, hiking for 7 or 8 miles is work. But there are so many teachable moments at the state park. You're right, Flo. Like, you can work on language, you can work on physical skills, you can work on academics. That's a great setting. And
oh man, in every tree. He's an arborist.
That's awesome. And I just want to also note to other parents that your child doesn't have to understand a system of reinforcement for reinforcement to work. That the next step might be to teach them the system, but your action of rewarding them for what they do is going to naturally teach them that plan, that, when I stayed at the table during dinner, she let me look at my tablet. And when I got up, she took my tablet. So if I want my tablet, I'm going to have to sit. The child doesn't necessarily have to understand that, he's going to get it on Friday yet for it to work. Don't think it's too early to start working on reinforcement. The earlier, the better. And it'll be easier to fade and work into a system if the child understands that they get rewards by doing what you want them to do. They should be thinking of you as that person who helps them get what they want.
And I'll just say this about reinforcers and reinforcement. Number one, sometimes it's worth the time to do a reinforcer assessment. And I know that sounds very formal, and it does not have to be formal. It's like, which would you rather have, M&Ms or gummies? Well, I'm going to work for M&Ms. You can keep the gummies all day long. But sometimes, and I've had this happen, where as parents, we think we know what's reinforcing for our child, but when given a choice and they consistently pick something else, it's kind of a clue to us that, oh, okay, so maybe this edible isn't the edible. And I will tell you, we've gone as far in teaching some kiddos one time as to cutting Skittles into fourths to minimize that amount of sugar and whatever. But one Skittle can go a long way when you're trying to teach somebody something. It ruined your knives, but it did a great job in helping to teach. But it's important that, and we all, like Amanda said, we all work for reinforcement. If somebody gave you a bag of broccoli at the end of the month as your payment, you might be a little less motivated to work as hard the following month, unless you just really love broccoli. So we all work for it. And a funny story, but kind of tells on a teacher, and I won't say who it was, and this is many, many years ago. I'm sure they're since retired. But I was an autism consultant for a good while, and I was talking to a teacher about primary reinforcers and the importance of them. And, there's a way to manage that. And it didn't mean that, the kid was going to get, have to work for M&Ms the rest of their lives, that kind of thing. She was adamant to me that she did not believe in primary reinforcers, the use of food to reinforce you, as she's sitting at her desk with a Coke and crackers. And I finally had to point out to her, well, I'm having a hard time understanding why you have a problem with primary reinforcers when you're having a snack as we speak. So we've got to take that into consideration as well. You know, we've got to make sure where our belief systems really are with that. But you know, the thing with reinforcement is find out what it is that really genuinely reinforces your child, and then also be consistent, because the reinforcer won't work. Eventually you'll get to a place where intermittent reinforcement is very, very powerful. But when you're teaching a new skill, you've got to almost one for one. Okay, you did what I wanted you to do. I'm going to reinforce you, regardless of what that looks like for your kiddo. And then as they gain that skill, then you can slowly back off or use what's called intermittent reinforcement. That, okay, I'm going to get reinforced. I'm going to do it again, even though I didn't get something, because I may get something this time. And so you'll kind of learn how to dole out that reinforcement so that you can still see the behavior that you're desiring.
And just one more tidbit on reinforcement is you may need to reserve it for the times you are teaching that skill so that the child wants it more. Because let's say that their reward is Skittles. If they eat Skittles whatever they want, then they're not necessarily going to clean up their toys for Skittles, because they can have them whenever they want. So reserving those rewards for the skills that you're working on is going to make them so much more powerful. The next step is breaking big skills into smaller steps. When you've selected the skill you want to work on, breaking it down into small, manageable steps and focusing on each step individually can help you be more successful, especially if you've tried and something's not working. This method of teaching a large skill in small chunks is sometimes called a task analysis. And while you don't really need to know that lingo, I wanted to give it to you because you may hear it in your child's IEP or behavior plan or their accommodations page, and I wanted you to understand what that means. But also, it's a really good thing to Google when you are looking for ideas or strategies on how to work on something. For example, I Googled hand washing task analysis, and I got this visual here that has the steps for me, or with pictures, or I'm sorry, with pictures or with words. When I was a teacher, I had a child who did not want to put her hands in the water. She had some sensory issues, and at the same time, I had other students I couldn't keep out of the water. You know, they were always running to the sink, turning it on, playing in the water. Different reasons perhaps for that, but hand washing was something I needed to work on and teach explicitly. So does this sound familiar to any of you guys? Do you guys have any children that have issues with hand washing? This has been a really critical time maybe for working on that skill with COVID. Okay, we've got a yes in the chat box.
We did too, and we did kind of the breakdown, but what we did was we mirrored what the school was doing exactly. Like, I used the teacher's verbatim for how she instructed it, so that way we could put consistency to match what the school was doing. That was how we conquered the hand washing battle.
That's excellent. And I think that using visuals or a task analysis is a really good way to make sure that we are consistent and working on the same thing. So if the teacher is using a particular visual and having success with it, it is totally appropriate to ask her, can I get one of those for home? Or can I take a picture of it so I can make the same thing at home? And having this task analysis lets you maybe understand What element of hand washing is a struggle for the child? Is it that sensory issue of having wet hands? It might be the smell of the soap. It might be the way the soap feels, and that's an easy fix because there's lots of different varieties of soap. You can try another one. A very common one for me was the sound of the hand dryer. So we had a hard time with washing our hands in public, but in the classroom bathroom we had paper towels, and that was fine. So that's just another way that we can maybe nail down what the problem specifically is. All right, and then Christina said that her son had sensory mainly issues, plus he was trying to rush because he was panicking about the toilet flushing and ready to bolt out of there. That also sounds extremely familiar to me. And I had a child who was toilet trained at home, and we could not get him to go at school. And that we found out that breakdown was automatically flushing toilets at the school. And they flushed randomly, and they flushed loud and hard to the point that the water was like splashing. And that toilet difference was really the issue. And we ended up asking the nurse to use the bathroom in the nurse's office that had a regular flush. And he showed us he could go at school, but he was also remarkable at holding it. and that can happen sometimes. Christina, I see you say he does not go at school. Similar experience? Sometimes it's the setting. Sometimes it's just the difference in expectation of going to a bathroom that has stalls versus a private bathroom. In a stall, not only do you have to worry about your toilet flushing, you have to worry about nearby toilets flushing. These are the reasons that some of these skills are more difficult. It's not necessarily like a cognitive, like I don't understand how to go to the bathroom. It's these issues really are interfering, and they can cause those impeding behaviors, which might be trying to run out of the bathroom or having a meltdown or refusing to go in. So while the task analysis itself isn't going to fix the behavior, it's a way we can really figure out what about this is the issue. That hard step is the step we've really got to up our reinforcement on. Hey, if you can stay in there while the toilet flushes, you win. But it's okay also to be like, I'm going to get him through the process and flush, once he's out of there. Maybe he just has to say, will you flush? And let that person flush for him and let him out. And we'll work towards it. So it says he's still learning to wash all fingers and get all clean though. Yep. But you're working on it. And he's making progress. So that's great. Any skill can be broken down into smaller steps typically. This is another thing we can help you do. The way that I do a task analysis sometimes is I just go through the actions myself and jot down each thing I'm doing and make sure I'm not missing anything. And this will help because now you've got something tangible to share with the other adults so that everyone's consistent when they're helping your child learn those steps. So the next kind of, I guess, idea is incorporating effective teaching strategies and tools. And there is a whole lot of information on this slide, but I have just provided you really with 3 strategies and tools. And the first is explicit instruction. And explicit instruction is a way to teach in a direct, structured way that is research-based. It makes the task more clear because we model to the child what to do, what to say, and what we're thinking, partnering with the child through the steps together, giving them prompting and praise along the way, giving them specific feedback, and then giving them lots of opportunities to practice and consider and continue to receive that feedback and receive those rewards. This instructional method is often used by special education teachers, and it can easily be transferred into the home environment. And sometimes you're going to hear that described as I do, which is when the adult demonstrates the skill while modeling what to do, what to say, or what to think. And then we do, which is where you do it alongside your child, providing them those prompts, giving them praise, giving them feedback. And then finally, you do, which is you step back and allow the child to practice it on their own. And that's going to allow you to see where they are in that skill. What is their level of independence? What type of teaching might need to occur next? The second is using visual supports, which I saw on the KWL chart. Many children with autism are primarily verbal learner or visual learners due to those communication delays and sensory issues. And so much of what we do in our society is verbal. And so it's kind of like Flo was talking about. It's navigating a world where we don't necessarily understand the social norms or the language necessarily. So providing those visual supports is a way to promote independence. One way to do that is a visual task analysis, which I showed you with hand washing, but here I'm showing you another one, which is on kind of the procedures that the child needs to do when he gets home from school in order to get his snack. I think there are lots of children who probably would need this same step whether or not they have autism, because I know kids come in, they throw everything on the floor, they run straight to the kitchen. But this visual task analysis lets them know, in order to get that snack, I want you to hang up your coat and backpack, check your folder, give me your folder from your teacher, wash your hands, and snack. This task analysis could also be broken down into much smaller chunks for a child who isn't able to do these. So if I were using this one, it means that my child can do each of these steps. He just doesn't necessarily do them all in order regularly. Because if the child also needs the hand washing task analysis, then maybe he's not ready for this entire sequence, if that makes sense. If you have particular skills that you are struggling with, or you think you might be ready to start, and you'd like some visuals like this, that's another thing that I'm able to assist with. When you complete the evaluation, or all of you have my email address, if you just reach out to me, we can talk about the specifics of where your child is and what you might like on that visual. But I did want to kind of offer that, because that's something that we're able to do for you guys, if that's something that would be helpful. And then finally, here is a strategy that we already talked about a little bit, which is video modeling. It works well for children with a high interest in technology, and for children that already have the ability to imitate some actions or some language. The benefit of them is that they're consistent. The child can watch it over and over again and see something done the same way again and again. That way, you can pause it. If it's multiple step, the child can do one step, pause it, watch the next step, do that. You can fast forward to the part of the task that's difficult, or you can use it for anything. I mean, self-help skills are what we're talking about today, but you can video model any kind of thing that you're struggling with, as long as it's something you can film. So I have an example here of video modeling, and it's funny. It is about shoe tying, which we talked about earlier. I'm just going to play it.
Grab red string, grab blue string, make an X. Pull the blue underneath, pull tight. Make a bunny ear with the blue lace. Swoop all the way around with the red. Find the red in the hole, pull tight.
So, as we already talked about, shoe tying can be a tough skill. There are lots of shoe tying videos on YouTube because specifically that, because it's a skill that's harder. It really involves a lot of fine motor skills. But if the child has the video, then they're able to work on it. You could also put those colors on your child's shoelaces and practice it. And I just chose that one because it was short and simple. But if the way that you teach tying shoes is different, you can always make that video as well. And again, if that's not the functional thing you want to work on right now, you can buy your kids some slip-on shoes, and that's okay. All right. And prompting is just another word really for helping. When teaching self-help skills, it is recommended to use prompting and to fade those prompts out as the child becomes more independent. Physical prompts means providing physical guidance to help the learner complete the skill. And light physical guidance would just be gently kind of guiding them to begin the task that you're working on, like maybe a gentle touch to the elbow or guiding hands to help your child get to the sink, where hand over hand or full physical guidance might be used for a child who isn't even sure where to begin, or a skill that we have to do regardless of our child's ability. So an example might be toothbrushing. There are a lot of reasons that a child might struggle with toothbrushing. If they have sensory issues, the feeling of the toothbrush in their mouth, if it's a taste thing, the toothpaste, or understanding all the multiple steps it takes, for whatever reason, toothbrushing is another skill that many children struggle with. But full physical prompting or hand over hand might be where you need to begin, because you don't want your child to get cavities. And so that might be placing their hand on the toothbrush, placing your hand over it, and brushing their teeth together. When you know that they're able to do that, then you're going to provide them with less and less assistance. So that would be fading out that prompt. So my recommendation is that you use physical prompting when a child cannot perform a task independently, but not necessarily for those times when they're just refusing to do it or they won't do it. Maybe a light physical guidance is fine, but if you feel like that physical prompting is going to escalate the child and cause them to become very upset or really anxious, that's not going to be an ideal teaching moment. So this is another one of those times where we have to be realistic and think about, okay, he's not going to tolerate me physically assisting him in this task right now. He's going to be upset. He's going to cry. He might try to get away. He's not going to learn in that moment because of that. So you might need to rely on a different strategy there. And that might be reminding them of the reward that they can earn for doing it. It might be giving them a break. Let's try it again in a little bit. But as much as using the prompting is going to be helpful, you don't want to prompt to the level that's going to cause the child to be really upset. And just know it is important to work on fading those prompts, because we don't want our child to be dependent on that forever. And if you find yourself repeating yourself a lot and giving verbal directions or verbal prompting over and over and over again, then it's important to look at these other types of prompting, something a little less invasive, maybe like pointing, having those visuals posted, because if the child can follow the visuals, then they don't need you to be there guiding them through every step of the way. And remember, the goal here is independence and you not having to be on top of them. And if it's that verbal thing that's always going to be required to get them to do it, then they're not going to be able to do it without that verbal reminder. Any questions about this?
I will say with the toothbrushing, if they've got a favorite character, if they like superheroes, I would find that superhero toothbrush. I would find the Snoopy toothbrush, whatever it is, because that's just one more thing to make it a little more inviting. And also sometimes with things like with toothbrushing, it's given a child an opportunity to just explore the toothbrush before you put it in their mouth. Because that's just a whole nother world when you start adding something like that. So
And it's possible that a child might have a setback with these types of things. Like if they have a loose tooth, suddenly brushing their teeth is a little less comfortable, or if they have a cavity. So always remember to like rule out those kinds of physical reasons something might be happening, just because um it's not necessarily a behavioral reason. And that tip Flo gave with the toothbrush, that really translates anywhere. If you're working on potty training, look for underwear with their favorite character on them, or put their favorite character on the reinforcement chart that you're using to reward them for going to the bathroom. Tying those interests in is huge. All right, so now I'm going to put the link to the Jamboard back in the chat box. And what I would like you to do is go to the second page. And that is going to be what you learned. So let me share it so you see what it looks like. And share either something you learned or something you plan to try about teaching independent living skills to children with autism. And if you didn't and you still have questions, go back to that page 1 and put them under what do you still wonder, so we can make sure to address it now or later. And again, if there were any things that I talked about that you would like help making, or maybe some good websites for, if you let me know that, I will work on getting those for you. Additionally, I am going to put a second link in the chat box. This is a needs assessment that's going to allow us to better meet your needs moving forward. It's just a place, if there are specific requests of things that we might be able to provide training on, or have someone speak to you on, or just lead a discussion on, this will be the place you can say that. You can also let me know at this link if you want me to help you make something. Just make sure you include your contact info and I will get it to you. And I want to thank Flo and Shelly for being here today to assist. Flo, you had so many really good strategies and just ways to make things real world with your experience. And here we have someone learned or plans to try to remember what's age appropriate for their child, and someone who wants to do less and less verbal and physical prompts and try some of the others. Absolutely. Because again, those are things that require us to be there to do those prompts. Is there anyone who has anything else to share, or questions, or anything for the good of the group? So one of you asked about books, and I will tell you these are two resources I use. In the first, it's a book from 2007, but it is a fantastic book called Self-Help Skills for People with Autism, and it has lots and lots of visuals in it that are like ready to go. I am happy to include the like Amazon link to that when we send out the resources, because I am going to give you guys these slides so that you will have the handouts with the links live and active. Oh, actually, my next slide. This is what the book looks like, and it is linked already. I also have included an article on Autism Speaks about life skills. I have included a link to a lot of free video modeling resources. Also, a reminder to always check YouTube. And then this site here has lots of visual supports that are already made that are ready to go if you just print them out. So you will get the links to all of those as well. And thank you. I have really enjoyed having you guys this year, and we plan to continue this in the next school year. I am going to try and get you guys all the dates in advance so you can put them on your calendar and spread the word to other parents you know. And if there is anything else, always feel free to email me and reach out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank you, guys.
everyone.
Bye. Thank you.